Okay.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Wee Youssef, and I am the chair of the Career Pathways program here at ODU. Thank you for coming to our second workshop for the fall 2018 semester. We have a presentation from the university libraries on research resources. Then we'll have a panel discussion, and I'll allow our moderator and then our panelists to introduce themselves at the time, but for those of you who are in the room, we do have resources in the back on preparing future faculty and preparing future professional certificates. And for those of you who are viewing via WebEx, a lot of these resources are available on the Career Pathways website. So please feel free to connect with the website and download some material or contact me via email. So Abby,
Okay.
start.
All right. So I don't think I need a microphone. I'm usually pretty loud. All right. So my name is Abby Basel. I'm the Engineering and Physical Sciences librarian here at the ODU Libraries, but I'm representing all of the reference librarians here today. So what I'll be covering will be general, not just focused on STEM. So I just have a few minutes, so this is going to be very much a surface presentation. I would strongly encourage anyone who wants follow-up on any of the things I'm covering to reach out to me. If it's not my subject area, I will gladly pass you along to the proper librarian. One of the things I wanted to start talking about is something not on the slide, which is that we have a liaison program in the ODU libraries, which means that the reference librarians are assigned to certain colleges and departments. So I'm assigned to the College of Engineering and then the Physical Sciences departments, chemistry, computer science, physics, and math. We have other librarians assigned to business, arts and humanities, social sciences, health sciences, etc. So again, if you want to just reach out to me, but maybe you're in the education program or in a history program, I will definitely get you to the right librarian. And we take our liaison duties very seriously. We have a lot of one-on-one consultations with faculty and students. Sometimes we do those in person. We're happy to do those over the phone or email. Sometimes we do them online via WebEx or Adobe Connect. So if you remember only one thing from my brief presentation here, it's don't hesitate to reach out to us because we absolutely are here to help. So one of the things I wanted to start off with is actually not a library resource, but it's something that's extremely popular across subject areas, and it's Google Scholar. And I use Google Scholar, but it's not the only tool I use, but I'm encountering a lot of people who tell me it's the only thing they're using. So I just want to talk about it a minute. So one of the things about Google Scholar, right, it's really familiar, it's really easy to use, so therefore extremely popular. But when you're in Google Scholar, you're not really telling it who you are and that you're affiliated with the university, right? You're just any old user. So when you're in Scholar, you may not be getting to some of the full text subscriptions that the library has paid for way behind the scenes. We spend millions of dollars every year paying for subscriptions to ebooks and e-journals and all kinds of things, conference papers. So when you're in Scholar, there's a way to change your settings that will help you get to some of our full text, but it still won't take you to all of our full text. So I like to point this out to people. It's pretty easy to do. You go to your settings menu, you click on your settings sprocket, and over here on screen 2, you click on library links, and these 3 boxes will come up for ODU, and you check all 3 of those. Now, what this is telling Scholar is, when I'm, you have to type the Old Dominion name in the search box. It'll self-populate as you're typing. What this will tell Scholar, once you save this in your settings, is when I'm searching Scholar, if there's full text that you can connect to an ODU paid subscription, give me the full text. But Scholar wasn't really meant to do this. It wasn't what it was built for. So it can't get to everything the library subscribes to. It can just get to some of it. But doing this, if you have your cookies turned on, this will stay like this until you change it back. So you'll get to more full text than you would have otherwise, but not to everything. So what I try to tell people to do is be like me and use both things. Use Google Scholar and the library databases, because you will find things in Scholar that aren't in the databases, but you'll also find things in there like if a researcher also is a faculty member, you might find their blogs or a link to their syllabi, things like that. That might be what you might consider noise. The library databases don't have that. They just have more of the pure published research. So I just want to talk about those for a second. So the libraries pay for over 400 databases. Most of them focus on a specific subject. Like there's a database just for American history, and then there's one for world history. There's a database for criminal justice, for engineering. There's a database for automotive and mechanical engineering even. So there are lots of very subject-specific databases covering topics A to Z. And you'll find things in there that beyond just journal articles. So dissertations and theses written from around the world. And this is a company based in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and they actually have really been working hard to digitize more and more dissertations and theses going back further in time. So it used to be anything past 1990, you couldn't get the full text. Well, recently I was searching for a dissertation for somebody, and it was from 1955, I think, and it was online, the full dissertation, all 230 pages of it. So this is a really great resource, and again, it's global. We have a database that covers just conference papers, but a lot of the databases include conference papers. And in some fields, that's the main way people are communicating now. In engineering, that's the main way that engineers communicate now is through conference papers. So we have a database, for instance, in engineering, where 50% of what it's added, the items it's added to the database in the last 3 years are conference papers. We also have, of course, lots of peer-reviewed journals available through the databases. So we have this A to Z list of databases on our library website. I'll point it out in a second. So if you already knew the name of a database, okay, if you were searching chemistry and you knew that the database you wanted was called SciFinder, you could go to the alphabetical list, click on S, and go to SciFinder. But a better way to do it, I think, is to use what we call the research guides. So these are guides that are online that the librarians here put together, the subject liaisons. So we take all the information from that 400 plus list of databases, other subscriptions we have, other information relevant to our subject area, and we put it in one guide. So it's like one-stop research shopping. So for instance, in the education guide, would be the best databases to find information on education, the best ebook collections for education, websites that have already been reviewed for high quality content and credibility, that would be there. In the engineering guide, because engineering is different from education, I also have links there to patent information and standards, things that are important to engineers. So these guides are listed by subject, and then we also have guides just for graduate and faculty research in those. So let me just take you out there for a moment and show you what I'm talking about. Yes, or not. All right, hold on. See what's going on. What's going on? Spinning. Has the weather somehow impacted? Okay, I don't know. Won't even let me click in there. Okay. All right. It's always something. All right. Let's get to the library homepage. All right. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're at the library homepage. Whenever you're on the Old Dominion University site, underneath the search box in the top, there's always a link to the libraries. So if you click on that, this is where you're going to land. So right down here under research is the databases A to Z list that I mentioned. If you already know the name of the database you want to search, you can find it here. Now, the research guides, next week, there's going to be a button right here next to these two gray buttons. There's going to be a button that says research guides. But right now, I have to go under more and get there. Okay, so this is alphabetical list the guides are organized by subjects for the most part. Okay, so you go to your subject area, you can see what guides are there. Again, librarians are putting the best quality information on this subject in one easy place to find it. Okay, but we also have guides that are on other topics that might be of interest, things about copyright and graduate research guides, information about predatory publishing, getting your work published in general. So most guides are on subjects, but we have many things under research support that you might want to look at. So I just want to show you what a typical guide looks like. There are links on the left. Information is organized under here, and as you click on those, content changes here in the middle. So these are all the best databases for the humanities, and they're broken up in subdisciplines. So really helpful information. The other great thing about the guides is that it's easy to find the liaison for your area right there. Their photo will be there and a link to their name that you can use to email them. So really easy way to reach us. We're happy to help you with that. Lots of guides online. Just want to get back to where I was. Yeah, cancel. Oh, this is fun. I'm having a lot of good time up here. I don't know what's going on here. Okay, here we go. So databases, over 400. I think we actually have about 435. Lots of guides on different topics, some subject-based, some more topically based. The other thing everybody should absolutely know about is interlibrary loan. If you don't have an interlibrary loan account, I strongly, strongly suggest you sign up for one. This is a free service the library offers. You should never pay for information. So what's happening a lot is people are in Google Scholar, they're finding things that look good, they're not getting connected to our full text, and so when they click on an article or a paper that looks good, Google Scholar says pay $130 for this article, right? The publisher is locking you out because it doesn't know that we already have a subscription over here in ODU libraries. So do not do that. If you find yourself, taking out your debit or credit card, remember that I said do not do that. So interlibrary loan is a service that libraries provide, and we share information with each other all day. So this is a really common service that university libraries provide. You sign up for an account, it's free, it's very easy, it's like a very short form. It takes about 30 seconds to get your account. Then when you find information, a conference paper, a book chapter or something, a book that we don't have access to, either online or upstairs in the stacks, you can ask interlibrary loan to find a library that has it. If it's an article or even sometimes a book chapter, they'll send it to you as a PDF. It'll arrive in your email. It takes about 2 to 3 days. I actually had to take 1 day once, and I had to take 4 days once. So I say 2 to 3 days. 2 to 3 days, and the PDF is yours to keep, and this is free. If it's a book you're looking for, it's actually going to be shipped via UPS, so that can take 7 to 10 days. We'll lend you the book for a certain period of time, and then you'll return it to us, and we'll send it back to the library from which it came. So really, really great service, saves you a lot of money. Don't hesitate if you don't know how to start your account, you're having trouble with your interlibrary loan account, which is often referred to as ILL, just reach out to me. I'm happy to get you started, because this is a super important service for grad students and faculty especially. Undergrads use it, but definitely faculty use it more. All right. So the other thing I wanted to mention is EndNote. So you might be gathering references on your current research and it's getting unwieldy maybe. There are all kinds of services you can use to store and organize your references. So there's Mendeley, which you have to pay for. There's Zotero, which is free, open source. There are other products, but the university has decided to pay for EndNote for current full-time staff, students, and faculty. So this is the full version, not like a thin version of it. It's the full version, and it's prepaid. So this is a thing, I think it costs about $250 out there in the real world. So it's a wonderful opportunity while you're here to make use of it. So what EndNote does is, if you're not familiar with citation managers, you can store your reference in there, your article title, the page numbers, the authors, all of that, your abstract. But you can also, if you wanted to, you can actually store the PDF. You can store the full text document in there as well. And then the great thing is it'll format it for you. So it has over 100 styles. It has the common styles like APA and MLA and IEEE and all that. But it also has, styles, how certain journals have particular styles that they ask you to use when you're submitting a paper for review. So it has lots and lots of styles in there. So as you're working in EndNote, you're getting not just the information you want to reference, but it'll format it for you. And it has this really nice feature called Cite While You Write, which is a plugin that connects it to Word. And when you're in Word typing, you can connect it to your EndNote, and it'll drop in references as you need them. So that's a really, really nice feature. So EndNote has two versions. It has a desktop version that you would install to your device, and it has a cloud-based online version. And you can use both. I use both. You can use both, but the trick is, if you're going to use the installed version, you must, to get the free, prepaid, full version, you must go through the ODU's ITS software site. People are, when I tell them about EndNote, they go out and they Google EndNote, right? And they download it, and that's just a trial version. And at some point, it'll either expire or it'll ask you for an activation code. That means something's gone wrong, okay? If you go through the ODU link that you need to use, that won't happen. It won't expire, okay? So there's a guide, just like I was in the guide before for engineering and education. We also have some software how-to guides online. And there's an EndNote guide that has the links that you need to use to do the proper download. It also has the links to the online cloud version. The interfaces are fairly similar. There are a little few differences here and there. It also has, the guide also has some installation information if you're doing the downloaded version, and it has some help information to get you started. So one of the great things about using a service like this, EndNote, Zotero, Mendeley, whatever, when you're in a database searching and you find some references that look really good, most of the library databases now realize this is a service they should offer. Because the library databases are companies that are competing against each other for library business. We're talking big, 6, 7-digit contracts, okay, big money. So once one started to offer something, they all start to offer it. So most of the databases have some way when you're searching in them to export your information to EndNote or Zotero or whatever. So right while you're searching, you can be filling up and storing and capturing references in EndNote. It's really quite nice. So to do that, to understand how to do that, and to do the download properly, you just go to this guide. It'll help you with all of that. The other thing I wanted to mention about EndNote, so let's say you leave the university, your cloud version, at some point it will know that you're not a current member of the university community, and it will turn off. Your downloaded desktop version will not. It'll just be out of date. And if you wanted to update it to the current version, you then have to pay for that, but your information would be in there. The other thing is the cloud version allows you to share folders. They call them groups, but allows you to share folders with each other. So if you're doing team research, you're collaborating with somebody here on campus or somebody else who has an EndNote account, the cloud version allows you to share so you can both enter, add references into folders. So that's one thing that the desktop version doesn't allow you to do. So it's a really great free service that kind of goes with the research databases and the research guides. It all kind of folds in together. So that's pretty much what I was going to cover. Does anybody have any questions or want to mention anything they think I should have included?
You used to run workshops on EndNote and some other, practical guide to how to use the database.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still do that?
Yes. In fact, I think we just finished those on Monday. Okay. We usually offer every semester. I'm not sure about summer, if that's the case in the summer. I think we might just do one in the summer. But usually in fall and spring, we offer 3 typically, 2 in person and 1 via Adobe Connect. And we usually get lots of questions about EndNote for people who couldn't attend those. And so we do a lot of one-on-one help with EndNote. I do a lot of it for undergrads and grads. I do a lot of it via email, but just the other day I met with somebody and we walked through, what was the problem she was encountering. We have 3 expert trainers for EndNote in the library. I am not an expert. I'm like intermediate, excuse me. I'm like an intermediate user. So sometimes somebody will ask me a question that I can't answer and I refer it to the 3 experts. But it really is, I know some people really prefer some other services, but the fact that this is free is a really a plus for it. And they're constantly updating it, I have to say. They just went from 8 to 9. Before they went from, they go pretty quickly through their versions. And so they do take feedback from users. I have seen that they're really kind of fixing some of the things that people want them to be able to do. And the other thing I like about EndNote is their customer service is excellent. I had 2 really strange things happen with my own version that just didn't make any sense, and they got back to me within an hour. And they really followed through and followed up. So I really like it. I know some people prefer Mendeley instead, but Mendeley costs money. This doesn't. But if you don't like this, I would strongly encourage you to use something, because you're going to be gathering so many references, and it's so much easier to store them now and then use them later on than to try to find them later on. Because the other thing about EndNote is, as far as we can tell, it doesn't have any storage limit. So we haven't had anybody say to us, oh, I hit a wall that said I only had 2 more articles left, or I only had, half a mag left or something. In fact, I helped a PhD student the other day. He had over 1,000 things in his EndNote, and he had a lot of the PDFs stored in there as well. So, and he had never hit a wall of any type. So, err on the side of storing it in that case, right? Then try to remember, where did I find that article? So that was very quick.
I wanted to add.
Yes.
Sorry, let me see if I can make sure this works. Okay, I think it works. I wanted to add that one of the really nice things about EndNote with its more recent versions is the cloud EndNote, because it also allows you to sync your EndNote libraries from multiple computers. So if you have you have your EndNote library on your laptop, and then you might use a different computer, you can sync the EndNote library on that desktop, for example, to your cloud and have continuous access to your EndNote library. So it's amazing in that regard. And in terms of the limit, I have about 19,000 references in my EndNote library, and it will still let me sync. So.
Oh, that's great. I'm so glad you mentioned syncing, because I have a lot more EndNote slides usually, but I wanted to keep it to the 15 minutes. But syncing is wonderful, because I use the desktop version here, and then I use the cloud version when I'm not here. And the first time you sync, it creates a compressed library. But after that, it's very straightforward. It really is great to be able to sync the 2. Yes. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Sorry, because I have a laptop, I directly download the EndNote, but they save it in a WinZip file. Well, I don't have WinZip application at my laptop, so I cannot open it.
Okay, and did you do it through the ITS link? Okay.
The ITS thing.
So
but
there
they
should.
save it in a WinZip.
Okay. I've been able to find free software that will open up WinZip files, but what I would do is right outside here, right over here, is the help desk, and they handle EndNote install problems all the time.
Oh, okay.
So when you leave, if you have time right now, I would, when you leave, I would go over to the help desk and ask them to look at it. That's a really common question that they get is, I'm trying to install EndNote, something went wrong. The installation is pretty picky, I have to say. You have to have everything closed. If you leave one thing open, it'll look like it installed, then you go to use it, certain features will be grayed out. That's me, I'm a cautionary tale, I did that. So they handle questions like that all the time. Anybody?
Can I ask one more?
Yeah.
So for some of our graduate students who might be at a distance, could you speak a little bit about the chat with the librarian option for them to connect with a librarian through the website?
Mm-hmm. So the libraries, dare I tempt fate and try to go back? Yeah. All right. Boy, everything is like crazy slow. Okay, so library's homepage, under here, under help, we have We have the Ask a Librarian form, but more importantly, what we is talking about is we have the chat, which is very popular here. All the subject librarians, staff chat. I've been staffing it all morning, lots of questions coming in. So you can just pop on here to chat. Somebody will start to help you. If it ends up to be a very specific kind of advanced subject question, they'll transfer it to the proper subject librarian. But this is a way to connect with people immediately, which is quite nice. If you go to use chat after hours, then it'll drop you to this form here, the Ask a Librarian form. And that will automatically be sent to our email, and most of us answer those. I answer those like within 24 hours, and I think most of us do. On the weekends, it might not be 24 hours, but so there are ways to get to us online. And in fact, our business librarian, Miriam Bridges, has lots of distance students. And she does a ton of support with them via Adobe Connect. She meets with them via Adobe Connect a lot, WebEx, those kind of things. So don't feel like if you're at a distance, you only have the phone. We can do, we can meet you where you are in other ways. But the chat service is very popular, so don't ever hesitate to use it. And as I said, there's also a form if you just want to send an email to us, and it gets routed to us. Don't hesitate to contact us. That's all I can say to you. All right.
Thank you so much, Abby.
So, no, put this back.
That's great.
So welcome everybody. I also welcome the audience in WebEx. Good afternoon. My name is Alican Küçüközyiğit. I'm a graduate assistant in Engineering Management and Systems Engineering Department. So I'll serve as your moderator today. So thanks for coming and attending the Becoming a Skilled Researcher panel. So I'm proud to announce our distinguished panelists here. Dr. Shetty, Mrs. Abby, Dr. Regina Karp, and Dr. Harold. So I will just take a quick moment to let them introduce themselves and perhaps research areas. We already listened from Abby, but she can take her turn too. Can we start with you?
Yes,
Thank you.
I'm Dr. Harold Lee. I'm an NSF postdoc fellow at Norfolk State University. My research is in material science engineering, in specific organic semiconductors for renewable energy.
Thank you.
And I'm Regina Karp. I have been the graduate program director in the graduate program International Studies in the College of Arts and Letters. And I have probably supervised close to 30 dissertations and many master's theses. So I've seen it all. And I've seen so much of it that a few years ago I decided to develop a course on thesis and dissertation writing, where we go through the process of, how do you develop a research question? How do you develop a hypothesis? Where are my sources? Right? When people come to me and they've been reading and working on their subjects for 3 years and they're very knowledgeable, but how do you then, out of this knowledge, craft a dissertation? That is absolutely critical and will determine when you graduate how much time you spend just trying to figure out what it is that is your contribution to your respective field. We can talk more about this as we go along.
Thank you.
And as I said before, I'm Abby Basile. I'm the Engineering and Physical Sciences librarian. I've been here just a little over a year. I've worked at larger schools. I looked at smaller schools. Throughout all of those, I've supported graduate students and faculty. And one of the key things is for graduate students to really get a good handle on their thesis topic and then come to the libraries or meet with us online to make sure you're going to be doing thorough comprehensive research, and that's what librarians are for.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Sachin Shetty. I'm an associate professor at the Virginia Modeling Analysis Simulation Center, and I also have a joint appointment in the Department of Modeling, Simulation, and Visualization Engineering. Been a faculty for 10 years, so I have a lot of stories of what went well, what didn't went well. I think both of them, because I graduated over 40 students, both PhD and masters, and so they are doing well. for the most part, in academia, in industry, and the national lab. So I have stories for all of them. But again, I think when we go through this panel, I would like to talk about things that I could have done well and things that the students could have done well and good stories that they've done well. I think it's good to know that. And I think that should be the theme of this panel.
Thank you so much. I'm hoping we can get some of these stories during our discussion, almost 1 hour. And by the way, I want to also point out that we will have a dedicated question and answer part. But if you have questions, you can interrupt and ask, because if you have a questions, probably somebody else also has a question. And no question is like small or weird, so just ask questions, please. Okay, let's start with Dr. Regina, if you can step in for this question, because you have a lot of students, a lot of experience on guiding the dissertations. So what makes a good researcher? What are the key skills a graduate student needs to have to be successful in this competitive academic world or even industry?
Yeah, it's a really big question. There's no sort of ready-made answer to it, but I think building on what we have heard from our librarian here, know where your sources are is very, very critical, and how to access them. It requires mentoring. Find a faculty member who is within your area of expertise, or simply someone you have developed a relationship with who you feel comfortable going to and asking for advice. But then make sure you know what it is that's out there, that's available to you, because it is critical. There is nothing hermeneutic about being a graduate student, right? You are aiming to make a contribution to your field, and so you have to know what your field is and what the cutting edge research in your field is, because that's where you are going to place yourself. Nobody wants to know about something that's already out there, right? The typical question is the so what question. You may find that you've discovered this amazing, wonderful topic that nobody has ever written about. Well, there may be reasons why nobody has written about that. Some of them may have to do with sources, that there really are no sources about that. But ultimately, it really has to do with finding out what kind of contribution you can make to your field. Another thing that comes to mind is we encourage a lot of our students to write dissertations that can, within a year, be turned around for publication. And particularly for people who are looking for academic positions, having that first book within a very short time when you're on tenure track position is very, very important. And so, as you develop your own expertise, think about its relevance to the field at large. Are publishers going to be interested in that? And get to know publishers, not necessarily personally, but find out who the publishers are that publish in your area. Another skill is the skill of presentation and taking criticism, which I think is very important for professional growth. So go to conferences, present your work, open yourself up to peer review, get feedback. Sometimes it's not easy to find the resources to go to conferences. I don't know how other departments deal with that. But it is absolutely vital that at least once a year you go out and you present your work.
Thank you. Dr. Sherry, can we continue with you?
Yeah, I think you stole a lot of things I wanted to say, but I will add.
I'm sorry.
Just build on that.
But everything that you said is on the spot. I asked my students, this is the thing I was talking about, what I could have done well. When a graduate student approaches me to pursue PhD, I have this honest conversation of why did you engage in this exercise? What is the motivation? And I think it's always critical from you, because if the student were to say that I always want to be a professor, I always want to be a researcher, then my immediate response is, you will be writing for a living. And I and you, we had to work together so that by the time we graduate, you are well trained to write. And I can't stress this more, and that goes into the resources. If you want to write for a living and you want your writing to be good, you need to know how to read good stuff, because there's a lot of material out there. In order for you to be better, you need to know who are the good writers. When I say writers, obviously there's good research. It starts with good research, but there are people who do good research but don't write well. And there are many of those. So there's a difference between the two. And I always challenge my students to be able to, if they're capable of mastering both being a good researcher and being able to articulate good research. Because if you're going to be a tenure track professor, you'll be writing a lot of proposals, seeking funding. And that's a difference between writing a great paper and writing a proposal to seek funding. That's an art to it in terms of positioning your research and the importance of it, and because there are societal impacts of the research that you're doing. Some of the things that you may not have thought about while you are conducting the research. You don't think about societal impacts. You're just thinking about, I got to get a number of publications done. I need to make sure I get my job. And you're so focused on that, right? But when you read good research, people write well, you'll notice that how they frame the research problem, the perspectives that come from. And that also helps you broaden your horizons, because they're not just solving a problem, because these folks are so experienced and they put the problem in the context of a bigger picture. And sometimes it's very important. We get lost into the weeds, students do, and they don't look at the bigger picture. What's the whole point of this? Obviously, you want to make a contribution to the field, sure. And that's what you position yourself to. But along the way, if you realize there is a bigger impact of my work, and having that in the backdrop always helps. It guides who you are, and I always ask my student once they graduate, always know what you're going to be in 5 years and 10 years. And that big picture should always be there, and obviously you're trained to get there. But if you lose a big picture and you're always taking day by day, that's not who you are. That could be somebody, a PhD, anybody who's graduated with a PhD cannot tell me that, okay, I'm taking every day at a time. It can't work that way. We haven't trained you well if that's how you see your work. I'll see what tomorrow brings me. There has to be this vision that you have, and every day you're working towards that vision for sure. But it's, if you know that, that's what I was talking about, what I could have done better, trying to emphasize this to students more.
Can I just,
Yes, sure.
on the point of reading, one of the things that I found is so important is to tell graduate students that you don't read at the graduate level the way you read at the undergraduate level. And the exercise that we do is this. Most people read an article for substance because you want to know what that person has to say. But the real benefit is look at the organization of the article. Look at it from the perspective of how it is organized. You're smiling because we've done this. And you come away understanding why you initially liked this argument. What makes that argument compelling? Because it's based on the organization of the way in which knowledge is conveyed, right? And so when you talk about writing, it's not just writing, having a good idea, but also how do I make this a compelling piece? And these are skills. This isn't, very few people are born good writers, right? A lot of people have to work very hard at becoming proficient at this, but it is very possible. There's no obstacle to that.
Great. So I want to turn to Dr. Harold because I know he's reading a lot nowadays, right. And he has just graduated, and I'm sure he's writing a lot too. So I would like to get your insights. You can emphasize theirs or add new things or enlarge their ideas, their items, please.
I agree with everything you all said. Again, I'm pretty young into it. One thing that I would say really helped me out is understanding why do researchers do what they do in a certain experiment. Because I know for me, one thing my advisor did, he kind of had me repeat someone else's work to kind of get practice, get in the lab. If you can repeat this person's work, then that means you're doing certain steps right. But if you don't understand why they use a certain solvent or why they did a certain step, when it comes time for you to make an experiment, then you're not going to really have the freedom to kind of go, do that new thing that's out there. So I try to help people out. When I go to other people's research meetings, they say, hey, I read this paper. and I kind of want to build off of this paper. You know, first thing I go, why did they do that step for? Because once you understand that, now as an independent researcher, you can now go and pursue your own ideas, writing proposals, things like that. So again, and conferences as well. I completely agree with conferences. A lot of students don't understand that some conferences do have travel awards, right? So you don't even have to rely on certain places to pay for it. They'll pay for it for you. But for me, I had an opportunity to go to maybe 8 conferences last year. A lot of practice. You know, I was able to get a lot of practice in how do I articulate my work to other people, and not just my own, you know, peers, but now I'm talking international conferences, right? And now I can also go to look at someone else's work and kind of, okay, I like that idea. I think I might incorporate that into my work. So it allows you to grow, you know. And for my postdoc appointment, I had to write a proposal, but my proposal had to be separate from my dissertation. If I hadn't gone to those conferences to kind of see what's the cutting edge out there that I can build on, I wouldn't be able to write the proposal that I did. So I encourage the students to conferences, but learning how to break down the content that you're reading in a publication, and it'll definitely help you out in the long run.
Perfect. Abby, you want to add?
I would just add that everyone on the panel mentioned, you know, find the good research, find the good writers. And one of the things that's really happened, Google is so friendly and easy and familiar, but, you know, you really have to do, when you're at that graduate level and you're going across the bridge to become a faculty member or a postdoc, you really have to do a lot more research work. You really have to put in some actual time and effort, because it's not that same, it's just not going to be as easy and straightforward perhaps as undergraduate research. And that's one thing that we see across the disciplines, is that sometimes that mindset, it's a shift, right? And it's like, this isn't going to be a 20-minute thing. This isn't going to be a 2-email kind of question. This is going to be, I'm going to set out a lot of information for you. There's going to be a process and several steps and several databases you're going to have to look through to be really thorough and to find the best research. So it's like, yes, they need to know who the seminal authors are, you know, the seminal papers, what associations are publishers in their field, and the best sources. And it's not always the most straightforward thing. So they really have to devote some time to that piece. Thus, the one-on-one consultations that the librarians tend to do a lot with graduate students, because it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, I do want to add to that. That's one thing I did learn, I guess, transition from undergrad to graduate level. As an undergrad, you know, let's say you have an assignment where you're supposed to review this topic. Well, as an undergrad, you may Google the title, and then I see a couple of papers, and that's it. But the graduate level, I call it literature search. It takes hours. It's not I'm gonna put one title in, I get the top 5 papers. It takes hours to actually go in there and see the quality research that's being done, the time that has been done. Is it recent? Is it cutting edge? Is it applicable to what you're doing? Literature searching is a very time-consuming process. And the mistake I made beginning my graduate career, I didn't have anything to manage my citations. So I would just print papers off and then read it. And then my advisor, you know, first thing he asked me, well, did you find that in literature? I go, yes, I did. He goes, well, where is it? Where's the paper? Well, I have a drawer full of, you know, I didn't organize those things. So
Not.
Yeah. So I agree. I did. That's when I found out at Mendeley at the time. So, but the literature search and being organized with the literature once you find it, making sure you're managing the citations, because you can't write a paper without citations. It doesn't make sense if you really think about it. You know, you have all this information, there's no citation. So along with the time-consuming process of literature searching, definitely get you a program that help you organize those citations down the line.
Yeah, we call that a literature review in library land, but a lot of people just call it a literature search. And in no time at all, you can have a few dozen to over 100. So you really need some kind of system that's going to help you store and organize those, because you're really supposed to be being comprehensive and looking at dissertations. Depending on your field, it may include books, papers from a variety of sources. So it doesn't take long to be overwhelmed with a number of sources.
Yeah, I would say it's the first time my computer ever said I had too many tabs open. Because you look up and you see all of these tabs of papers that I found. Oh, yeah, you have to organize this. So,
Right.
yeah.
Thank you so much for all this great insight. Now I want to open up the discussion. Bora, you have something?
I remember that Dr. Krupp said while she was talking about literature review, don't have a kitchen sink approach.
Kitchen
So
sink.
literature review. That's why I'm having always some difficulties. I mean, how should I relate this one to this one? How is that? Under which file should I put it, and how am I going to remember that was here? And so that is a huge problem when you're working on your proposal or literature review.
So in my area, at least, every reference is different. So when a graduate student approaches me, we discuss a problem. I always ask the graduate student to start with a survey paper. So a survey paper is basically somebody has done the dirty work for you, where they have surveyed and if it's an emerging topic, then somebody has to have done a survey. And it goes both ways, because the reason why people do survey papers is increases their citations. And so at least, again, that's why I can only speak for my areas. So for all my areas, there's somebody who's done the survey paper, not up till 2018. But even if they have surveyed the area, and always I work in areas which have been hot for the last 3, 4, 8 years. So even if it's 2 years off, you have somebody who's done the dirty work of organizing all the papers into different categories. And so, as you mentioned, the important thing is you have the research problem, you identify the main categories and the lines of research that people have focused in that main generic problem. If somebody has done the dirty work for you, then that's half of your problem solved. If unfortunately somebody has not done that for you, then yes, that's on you. So I started working on a new area 2 years ago where nobody had done the dirty work. So the first thing that I challenged the student to do was write a survey paper. So if you're going to do the dirty work, get credit for it, right? If nobody has done this, then why don't you get credit to doing it? Because it's got two benefits. One, you get credit for doing that, impacting that area of knowledge. You get to use that in your dissertation write-up because you would have to have that background literature review section. So it goes both ways, but you're right. If nobody has done that, you'll have to do that in organized fashion. It can't be just searching a number of papers online. If there's no systematic way, it's just going to be overwhelming.
When you write a dissertation, it's often overwhelming because you start out very broadly and you think everything's relevant. It's very easy to get distracted, go off on a sideline. You think, oh, but I didn't really expect to go there. I really wanted to work over here. And there are several things that help. One is to have a really precise research question, because you have to be able to limit what it is that you're doing. It's not just what you're doing, but how you define the boundaries of what you're doing is equally important, because you have to justify those boundaries. Why is this stack of books over here not relevant to what I'm doing? And you have to know what you're excluding as much as you have to know what you're including. And having a strong research question, having a strong hypothesis. In my course, we talk about what is the difference between a weak and a strong hypothesis. Everything to do with that will limit what it is that you actually will be doing in the end. And then you know one day that you don't need to read more. But if you don't have these strong guidelines, you never know when to finish reading, because this over here could be relevant, or maybe it's this, and you never actually sit down and write the piece. And students struggle with that. I struggle with that. Everybody continuously struggles with that. This is not an easy skill. It's a skill that you develop over time. But it is, again, I want to emphasize, this is something that you can learn, because I find a lot of students are intimidated by the process of writing, a large piece of work. And I always emphasize the various steps that are pretty self-contained, and you move along those steps. And that makes it manageable and also less daunting, I think.
Wonderful. I think Bora's contribution also brought us to my second question, which is some answered as well. What are some gaps? I mean, what are the things that's common in graduate students who they need to develop. What are the gaps in the research skills that you identified in your graduate students? One we already learned, kitchen sink approach and relating the different articles. So what are some others? Actually, I want to start with Dr. Sherry, if you don't mind, and if you can decorate with some of your stories, good and bad ones.
Absolutely. I think I'll piggyback on what you said. I can't stress enough about that problem, right? Identifying the specific problem. And I have a big challenge with some of my students because they think, I had one student who said that, that area is hot and I need a job in that area and help me get there, right? So I said, well, if I was, unfortunately, I'm not in the business of helping you get a job. I need to train you, and that's an academic pursuit towards that. There are many roads to getting a job. My road is taking the academic route and not chasing after the latest and the shiny objects, which is the biggest challenge I face with a lot of my students because I'm in the area of cybersecurity and they see dollar signs attached with their jobs and they think that my job is to accelerate them to get to the highest paying job. So which is where most of my stories come from because I'm constantly challenged by students and after a couple of meetings, if we can't get a common ground on, I will get you to the highest paying job, but we have to follow this academic path of getting there. And that connection, right, that trust me that I will get you there. But we cannot be just chasing this buzzword approach to do research, which is, I don't know of other areas, but at least in my area of research, that buzzword chasing research is very apparent. And it's also driven by funding too. So there's two sides to it. Again, I'm talking about my area alone, where if I were to look into my specific area to see, there are only probably 5 to 10 really crucial problems that haven't been solved. And then we just try to add different wrappers and different buzzwords to just try to garner more money. And industry also works that way. So as academic, I always struggle. And one of my biggest challenge is convincing the student why you are here, why I'm here, what's the purpose here. I know the real world, what's going to happen outside academia world, especially industry, how dollars drive everything, right? And so getting that, and especially if the student wants to get into academia, then it's a straightforward approach. But when students want to get into industry, especially PhD students want to get into industry, it has presented the biggest challenge for me. And so the approach that I have been taking nowadays is when I have students who want to get industry, I try to partner or collaborate with industry research labs. So there are a lot of big industries. They have a research unit. So when I pick up a collaborator, I make sure that if the student wants to eventually get industry, I will have a committee member from the industry, but it'll be from industry research lab. So I'll give you an example. That's a company called Accenture, who are great in consulting, but they have a research lab component too. So the person that I collaborate with will be in the research because that's the purpose here, to make sure that your work is grounded in research. Because I can say all I want to, but I'm an academic, but when they hear from somebody from industry, it's a totally different ballgame. And that's something that I wished I'd done better when I started my career. But nowadays, when I have the conversation with the student, and when the student tells me that they would prefer to engage in industry research. So given that I've been in the field for 10 years, I got enough friends in the industry committee that I can tap into any one of them. And so that has definitely helped in trying to, you talked about gaps, for the student to recognize what is it they want to do, right? And sometimes they don't recognize that they probably don't have the skill sets to get there. Now, the discussion is, can we train you to get there, right? Being able to tap into what you're great at and try to feed that. If you want to get to where you want to be, are you willing to put in time to get there, right? So you want to get everything done and you want to graduate in 3 years. We probably should leverage your best friends to get there. But if you are willing to work, because I do believe that some of the skills can be trained with time. You need time to get there. But if you're on a fast pace and you want to get there, so we just have to find out what you're great at and try to maximize. It's extremely hard, but sometimes I think students either overestimate their capabilities at times, and being able to honestly do a self-assessment. What you graded, I think, is the hardest challenge for a lot of students. And it also goes to trust, right? How you have to trust the advisor. And it's a lot of communication, and that's another thing, being able to communicate a lot. I always tell my students, you can't go wrong with over communication. A lot of my students, they get into this rabbit hole of, looking at every paper they can. But I'd rather they communicated with me, not spend 2 weeks and then come back to me and say that, well, I saw 1,000 papers, couldn't find something relevant. Well, you could have just told me after 2 days. Why wait for the 1,000 paper after 20 papers and you didn't find anything? I could have helped you. And still I've struggled with my students. I can't stress you enough. Depending on your advisor, some advisors might take it the wrong way. I love when students communicate with me. I really enjoy that process because we are in sync. When you don't communicate, then I've got 1,000 things going on. And a lot of students sometimes think that they're bothering me. And I always tell them that if it's relevant to your research, you're not bothering me. And that has been a gap too with a lot of students. Not able to communicate. I say you don't have to have in-person meeting. There are so many different ways to communicate. But if you don't, then I'm not able to help you. So I think those are a couple of things.
Good. Can we continue with your experience on that? And you can give from yourself also,
Right.
since you're a recent graduate.
I would say a big one would be I think grad students need to understand a certain level of organization that's required. Whether it's from managing papers that you've read, how do you manage them and track where you get information from? Lab notebooks, right? How to write down your progress that you are seeing in the lab, and then being able to communicate that to your advisor. I've seen personally, someone goes up there and said that they're going to give a research update to their advisor, and the advisor's asking these essential questions. Okay, what temperature did you have this at? And they don't know, they don't remember. It's like, well, where's the lab notebook, right? Or they say a statement that's relevant to their research, and the advisor goes, well, do you have the literature for that? Well, they're like, well, I read it, but I don't know where it's at. I'm like, well, that's not how you keep track, of everything that you do. So I think understanding that research is not free reign to a certain extent. You don't just go in the lab with nothing to write down, write your information on, and just do things. You need to have a systematic approach of how are you going to maintain your lab records, how are you going to maintain publications, and then on top of that, to agree with what she said, having a defined research problem or a research question, because I would say it's very quite prevalent where you have these students that are just reading, and they keep on reading, and then a year goes by, they haven't been in the lab yet, they're still reading. And like, well, you have to know the cutoff point of where do you stop reading and where do you actually go get into that lab. Well, if you never have a research problem defined, you're just going to keep on reading. And so I think having the clear defined, I like to do it like this. I'd like to tell students, try to develop a title for your thesis or dissertation. I know the title's going to change, maybe may change over years, but at least try to have a title. Because to me, I feel like that's a good place to start. Because typically the title of the paper is going to give you an idea of what they're going to talk about. So I would say try to start there, at least have a title for what you want to do. And it may change down the line, so that's not bad. But you have to set those boundaries as well in your research.
Dr. Rajan?
In my experience, there are a lot of students don't really understand how conscious their own professional and intellectual growth is. When you think in your third year of coursework, and you think back about the person you were when you first came in, a lot of students know a lot more, but they don't know how they've learned. And this gets back to your point. Keep track of the ideas and the research that shape your own thinking. And this is something that you can build on. It attests to where you're coming from, what ideas you're bringing into your own work, and how you represent those ideas. It doesn't necessarily have to be through meticulous citation in your own work, but you do have to be aware where you're coming from, and it will allow you also to define where you're going and where your contribution is going to be. So be more self-conscious about how you learn and how you grow.
I was going to mention that there's a really big difference in research skills and actually searching for content across the disciplines. And one of the things we see with graduate students is that even though some of them might be in their second or third year of graduate school, they really don't have the skills that you might think that they would have by that point. Mm-hmm. And a lot of faculty advisors really assume that their graduate students are great searchers, that they can search for information effectively and efficiently, that they know where to apply these great searching skills that they have. And that's really not the case across the board. There's a really wide-ranging level of searching skills. And so it sometimes can be hard for the graduate students to make the case to the faculty member, I want to go to this workshop, or I need to meet with this librarian to really help me build those skills, because the faculty just have been assuming the whole time they had those skills. But sometimes, like I just did a workshop the other night with a learning community, like a study group of graduate students in a certain focus area in engineering, and some of them were quite advanced in their research plan, and I was really surprised at what they didn't know. They didn't know, often students don't know that, and somebody mentioned this before, who the big publishers are in their field. There are certain publishers that really focus on particular, not just particular like disciplines, but particular sub-disciplines. Yeah. And you should know those. Yeah. Is there a great research team at, University of Chicago in your field? Are they the ones putting out some of the cutting edge work? But also, even just to step back from that, there are certain techniques that librarians use when we're searching that make us expert searchers. And we really would like to see graduate students have those so they can make the best use of their time. So they're not looking at pages and pages of information, some of it complete noise and not relevant, what we would call false drops, and able to zoom in and focus on what they really are looking for. There are ways that you do that using certain kinds of search terms and language and other things, symbols. And it really is lacking in the graduate student world. And I actually went to a national conference for librarians on graduate student skills. And this is across the country. This isn't just here at ODU. Yeah. So it's something that a lot of us are really passionate about, like, oh, they're doing all this research and they're probably missing out on quite a bit amount of very important information, because you've got to make sure you're comprehensive. You can't, for instance, bottom line, you can't write your dissertation on something that someone else has already written on. There's a reason right there. So it's just a certain level of searching skills in addition to what everybody else has talked about.
Perfect. I would just like to summarize what we have been doing so far. We are good at timing. So in the skills, to summarize, framing the problem, and why are you engaging with this problem is knowing this skill will make you a good researcher, and writing for a lifetime, and plus reading. To write, we have to know how to read, so that's another skill, and getting publications right 1 year after the dissertation should be something that we should aim for. And if there's no publication on the area, we need to know why there's no publication on here. Maybe there's a reason for this. Another good research skill will be getting organized, looking at the conferences, which one is convenient for us, who pays for it, can we afford it, what's the aim of the conference or journal. So that's a good skill we should have. And from Abby, I think we got Google mostly, and resources, and using our resources that we already have, we might not know. So let's maybe take another look at what the library has. So in terms of gaps, to summarize, Dr. Regina said, know yourself. That's what I understood. We need to know ourselves and our gaps in our individual or character to know where to go in the research. So, and how we need to know how we learn. From Dr. Shetty, the industry and academic dilemma, like students want to go to industry, but they want to work with him, and they think that he is the best one to get the dollars. Well, that might be the case, but Dr. Shady needs time and he needs to train you, so you need to trust him and his team. So these things.
They probably think that I don't want them to make more money.
Right. Right. And we have to be open to the criticism and to be getting feedback from our readers, our audiences in the conferences, and we need to frame the research question right. And this looks, when I think about as a graduate student, all of these are all tough. You need to learn over the years. That's why PhD is long. But it's good that we have the faculty and library resources and these kind of workshops that can feed us and that can develop us. So I think that's we have to get out of our comfort zone and get connected, chat with librarians, go to the faculty's office, and I'm sure they are everywhere in this process. So we are not alone as a graduate student. I want to say that. So some answered, but I want to wrap up with your suggestions and advices by improving ourselves continuously. What skills need to be improved? I learned how to do the library research, and it doesn't change so much, but some skills maybe need continuous development and continuous education of myself. So in this matter, what are the skills that we need to improve every day? Okay, think about this for a moment. And I want to start with Dr. Harold again. So if you don't mind, you have another 5 seconds to think.
All right. I would say
we need to continue to develop the skills. So what are these skills?
I would say, for me personally, in the field that I'm in, material science and engineering is very interdisciplinary. So we have engineering, physics, math, chemistry. I have a chemistry background. One thing that helped me succeed is not being afraid to leave my comfort zone in regards to my research field. So again, having a chemistry background in the beginning, that's all I wanted to work with. But once I understood that this field is not just chemistry, it's physics, it's engineering, it's math, I kind of opened myself up to learning some of these other fields. And what that allowed me to do is it allowed me to collaborate with people. Because now I can interface with the engineer because I have some basic understanding of what they do and what their terminology is. I can work with the physicist, I can work with a mathematician, I can work with other people now. And it helps out on your own research because you never know who can help you out. You may be facing a very big problem that may be engineering related. And you go talk to an engineer one day and you realize hey, that person can really help me out. And that personally happened to me in my own research and allowed me to overcome some hurdles I had. So again, just don't be afraid to learn about a different topic. You don't have to be an expert in that topic, but maybe just get some basic idea, basic understanding of different topics. It allows you to kind of expand your research, allows you to collaborate and interface with people of different fields.
I think that's perfect. And we should not do this only one time. You left your comfort zone and come back and then stay there 20 years. So we should, I think, continuously leave our comfort zone and come back and then do it again. So that's right. Dr. Regina, can you continue?
I think amongst the many things we've talked about, I think, and it's come up before, but one of the really basic skills that people need to learn is good communication. If you go to your professor, you will get that professor's respect if you have clearly articulated questions. There's nothing more difficult than to help a student who doesn't know how to help themselves. So make use of the faculty, find people you trust, ask questions, make demands, communicate on a regular basis with your professors. Don't be shy knocking at someone's door and asking for an appointment. And I think this relates to what you said about the library and that faculty overestimate the research skills that students have. And I'm glad you brought that up because I do that. That happens to me all the time. And then I find, well, I'm actually much better searching the internet than my students. And there's something wrong there. You should all be better than what I can do by sheer age difference. So communicate your needs very clearly to a faculty member and go and see, particularly at the dissertation stage, go and see your dissertation chair often. One of the most important things to me as a supervisor is that I stay on track with your own development as a researcher, because I can relate much better to what you're doing and how your subject is developing if I am in communication with you. If I see you once every 3 months, I have no idea what you've been working on because I've got lots of other people to take care of. So stay in touch with the person that is looking out for you, and make sure that you communicate your needs clearly.
I think that's perfect.
I'm going to pass to Dr. Shetty.
Okay.
Always, I think I like the point about interdisciplinary, and this is something in my area when people ask me about cybersecurity, I always tell them that lately I see that as a human problem. The tools and technologies, they'll come and go. But at the center of all it is humans, right? And so the technology itself and being great at technology will not be sufficient moving forward. And being able to look at the impacts intersecting, whether it's the physical infrastructure, whether it's a society, people's psychology, being able to be curious about it. And even if that requires you to get out of your comfort zone, it can't be, you can't have the mindset that, okay, whatever I learned in my PhD, that will suffice for the next 20 years. I have to reinvent myself so many times the last 10 years, and never be afraid to do so. A lot of students feel like that will require them to change themselves. It doesn't necessarily. So if you, when we talk about interdisciplinary things, we're talking about still that curiousness of finding the problems, whether it's how your core capability can impact that area, how you can work with somebody in, let's say, psychology. I've been trying to figure out how to work with psychologists on developing a new area called cyber psychology, which might require creating foundational knowledge. That's the hardest thing to do, because you can apply something in a different area. That's easier because you're sort of working but not really working together. I'll give you something, you take what I give you, and I don't care what you do with it. That's kind of tangentially working, which is really what has been going on for the last 10 to 20 years. Different areas are kind of working together, but it's loosely coupled, right? I give you what you need, you give me what I need, and our areas will move forward. Creating foundational knowledge is the hardest thing ever, because different languages, there's a different language, the psychology language and cyber language, they're not the same, different notation, terminology. It takes a lot of work to get that. But if you don't push yourself to do that, then you'll never push to it. It also comes down to what you want to do, right? You cannot do incremental research. Incremental research is not going to get you too far. I mean, it'll get you by, but moving forward, it won't get you too far. The second piece, and this is also, we talk so much about effective searching. Over a period of time, you got to be able to differentiate between fluff and stuff. Okay, I can't teach a class in that, right? But over a period of time, and more communication. Because the more you talk to the advisor, you'll figure out how the advisor is thinking. If you could figure, if for me the best graduate student is by the time they graduate, they figured me out, like the way I think. If they figured the way I think, then they have mastered the art of how to be a good researcher. But that means listening and paying attention to what I'm saying, and then reverse engineering my thought process. Because if they can get to that point, then they save a lot of time, because they will be a discerning reader. They would know what really matters, what doesn't really matter, and speed up the time. I have this exercise for my students, papers that fall into that 5-minute read, papers that fall into the 30-minute read, the papers that are going to be staying with you for the next 3 years. If you are not able to figure that out, then you have not mastered the art. So I go through that exercise. These are the papers, 5 minutes. If you can't understand what this paper says in 5 minutes, then you're probably not ready to do this research. Because if you think that you could read every line of the paper to figure what's saying, you're not ready. The 5-minute read is I can go through the important section. I figured it out because there's a lot of fluff here, and the stuff is probably in that one section. Most of the stuff is just borrowed, derived, and obfuscated in a way to sort of present as new material, when it's not really. And it's a skill that and again, you can't learn this on day one, but over a period of time, you got to get to the level of realization that how much of it is 5 minutes, 30 minutes, and the papers that you're going to re-implement and get better will be 2 or 3. And if you can't get that, then you're not ready. So learn that skill, and then for new areas, it'll follow the same thing. Will follow. But remember the fluff and stuff. There's a lot of fluff out there, and for you to be able to discard that and focus on things that will help you is critical. And hopefully, throughout your PhD career, you can learn that skill, and that translates to every new area that you encounter. You will see that happen a lot.
Yes.
So this is we. But what I wanted to also add, I think, is also kind of an underlying part of the conversation is that this is a process.
Sorry, me?
It's a process. And one of the things, so, you know, my story is I've had, for example, a doctoral student come to me really frustrated in the middle of the dissertation going, no, you know, I didn't learn this methodology in class, or I didn't learn this topic in class. And so you might be doing a dissertation or using a methodology that wasn't covered in a specific class. But over the course of the coursework that you did, for example, we're also teaching you a process. We're teaching you how to scaffold and how to begin thinking about a question, how to build that literature, how to synthesize it to support the argument that you want to make. So we don't actually teach a class, or Regina might teach a class on how to write the dissertation and the thesis, but we don't actually teach you a class where you go from day one to working on that dissertation all the way to completing it. But every course that you've taken is part of that scaffolding, and it's part of that process of winnowing material, figuring out what methods might be more or less applicable, or thinking about, even from probably your first PhD class, one of the big things that you probably got out of it was, or even a master's level class, how to think critically about the material that's given to you. So everything that you've done so far is part of that process to get you to that stage where you can write a thesis, where you can write your dissertation, where you can write a really solid research paper, even for class. So it's very much the process is the foundation. And part of that continuous improvement, I think, is also building slowly onto your mastery of the process. So there will be a time where you're doing this research and you're not recognizing that, oh, I just went out and do the best research question without even thinking consciously that was what I was doing. Regina?
Yeah, comment on that, on process. But I think one of my most frustrating experiences is if I encounter this compartmentalization. This is this class and I'm done with it. Now I'm moving on to this class and then I'm done with it. When the whole idea of education is to develop that synergy, so that you look at the cumulative effort that you have been engaged in, rather than this compartmentalization, because ultimately your best research question comes out of being able to pull on these various experiences that you've had, and it may be, you know, irrespective of the subject matter, because what matters is the process of growth, rather than, you know, the specifics of a particular course. Just wanted to add that.
Great. I think I want to get your concluding remarks, final sentences, final words before I get to questions, if there is any. Let's start with Abby.
One thing I wanted to mention is that it's really a great idea early on to identify your professional association. And of course, some fields have more than one, but talk to your advisor and see which one they think is best suited to you, because a lot of professional associations have reduced membership rates or reduced conference attendance for students or even early career faculty. And it's not just a great idea for networking and, you know, building your network of possible job contacts, but also doing some of what we've talked about here in the beginning, you know, expanding, seeing what other research is being done, listening to cutting edge researchers, listening to somebody give a great presentation and noticing what made that a great presentation. How did they organize? How did they speak? Their body language. so it's not just, oh, I go to association, hopefully I'll get a job out of that, but just the content and the way the content is presented. And there usually are some sort of reduced rates for new people in the field. So I just wanted to put that out there. And in some fields, your association is also a major publisher for your field. So another good reason to be familiar with them.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Harold?
I would say personal experience, find you a great mentor or a set of mentors. And it doesn't always have to be just your advisor. But again, just having a group of people or person that you could not only talk to, maybe you got some issues going on, personal things, but also scientifically, that can maybe provide a different perspective on your research, right? So if I research in chemistry, and I talk to a physicist about something, they may be able to provide a different outlook on how I should approach a certain problem. So don't be afraid to have a group of people you can talk to about certain issues.
Great. Dr. Sherry, you want to add?
I think cherish your time being a researcher. One thing I really missed right now is just having the time to sit down and read. I do research by proxy through my students. So cherish your time to find out the foundational skills that you need, because you won't have the time later on to build those foundational skills. You'll have to build up on that. And so whatever is the foundational skills that you need, because now you have the time to read, build on the foundational skills. And the second thing I would add is try to follow good work. We talked about reading good papers, but following good work, so good research labs, cutting edge research labs, try to follow. And when I say follow, not so much on the papers that they're putting out, but the type of problems that they're always chasing after, right? So you will always be curious about why are they focusing on problem A versus problem B? What is driving that? If you look at big research labs, money is not the only thing that's driving them, because they have a lot of resources. So they are driven by other pursuits. So understanding in your given area, why would certain group follow certain areas? You'd see the trend in your area. So that's important to know what trend line to fall under, because that plays a big role. And that also goes with the thing about mentors, having a great mentor that will help you align, because you might want to pursue some problem, but your mentor is not supportive. That really hurts you. And finally, presentation. If anything that you can work on is oral, written, and any sort of articulation of your message. A lot of students miss out on that. Being able to present your work, especially when it comes to if you're going to present at a conference, it can't be a repetition of the paper that you wrote. So how do you present your idea? It takes a lot of skill, so don't miss out on that. Again, it goes by when you go to a conference, watch and observe how the great presenters present their work. That's a skill to be learned there. That's why you go to the conferences, not just to present your work and go back to doing what you're doing. Watching and observing how experienced presenters present their work, how they abstract out and present important things. So try to watch and learn from that, because it's extremely hard. It's hard for us to teach you on a day-to-day basis, because you have to be a good researcher. So we can't spend a lot of time teaching how to present it. Those are skills you can only learn by going to a great conference, listening to keynote speeches, and also great presenters, especially experienced ones. So when you have to choose a certain talk to attend, if there is a presenter that you think is more experienced, attend that talk versus a talk by a student which may or may not be the best. You can read the paper later on and learn the same information that you need. But sometimes you're attending a presentation more to see how they're presenting their knowledge, not so much about the information. So because you can read the paper later on and learn what it is, but how did they present that information? Because it's extremely important, because you might lose an audience in the first 5 minutes because you did great work, but they just don't understand what you're trying to say. And that 20 minutes is not enough for them. And so, and my students always struggle with this. I always challenge them to listen, pay attention, and try to inculcate as many skills as they can.
Dr. Karp?
Yeah, I think you all have a great opportunity to be here at Old Dominion University. There's lots of faculty and professionals who are very eager to help. This is an opportunity that may decide who you are and what you do for the rest of your life. So take advantage of it.
Thank you so much for all this great discussion. If you have any questions, I want to get them now. And if there's any online student questions, Dr. Yusuf, if you can relay it here. Yes. Is there a question? Laura, you good? Yes. No, you're good. So if there's no questions online or...
I just asked.
Okay.
I think everybody can tons of advice.
Oh. Maybe comments.
Please. Yes.
So sometimes when you're doing research and then you kind of like, you think that you come up with a good research question, or you have to come up with a good idea and you want to do the research on that, and then you go online and then you find all these materials that are exactly talking about what you thought had invented or something, and then you see all these situations exactly about what you're intending to do your research on, and then you feel like, there's nothing that I can add to this topic or something, because you feel it hadn't talked about all. So you feel like there's nothing that you can add.
There are two types of issues, right? One is you're the first to do it, or you're better at doing it, right? So I don't subscribe to the theory that you always have to me first, right? No, not everything is me first. I'm the first person to bring this up. And so after this, you don't have to work on this research. It doesn't work like that, right? So yes, they may have brought that up. Now, here's the thing, right? If this is something that's been going on for 10 years, then probably that's not much for you to add. So it also comes down to the timeliness of the topic, right? So just because you found some articles relevant to your idea, and that goes into what we're talking about, scoping it, right? So you thought of the idea. Is it an idea, or is it a very, very specific, well-framed problem? There's a difference between the two, because you might have an idea, but then you find that other people are talking about that. But maybe that is a segue for you to then properly frame your problem. Because sometimes it's a good start that you see something, because it says that what you're talking is relevant. Because if you find something and nobody's talking about it, A, nobody cares about it. B, that you're the first to come up with it and it's going to be a big thing down the road. So which one is more likely, right? I'll let you decide that. But it is not a bad thing that you found something. It's definitely, I don't see that as a bad thing at all.
No, I think it's a good thing if you find the sources, because otherwise it's just an opinion that you write up, and you need to have evidence that other people have already worked in this field. But besides that, I think if you look at precisely each of these individual pieces, they all started out with the expectation that they would add something to what is already out there. And you put this together, there are matrices you could create. What's the central idea in this piece? How is it supported? What's the central idea in this piece? How is that supported? And look for gaps. What is it that might have been neglected? What was hinted at? Where could further research illuminate that aspect of the problem? There are ways in which making your work unique is still possible, even if there are lots of things already on a particular topic.
I would say definitely, I look at it like this. I think there's an infinite number of ways you can improve on something, even though you may find literature on it. Hopefully you're not finding this, when you're about to do your dissertation defense. That's a bad time to find it. But if it's in the beginning of research, then that's good, because then now you know some areas not to dive into, right? So if you know someone's been detailed into this field or to this specific area, in your research, okay, there's no point in me trying to focus my work there because it's been done before. But it does give you a great foundation to start from, right? Because unless it's a review paper, which typically review papers don't have too many gaps because they're covering thousands. And I know in my field, some review papers have thousands of citations, right? But if it's one paper, there's always going to be something that they miss, because the paper can't be but too long, right? You can't have a very, very long, just standard paper. There's always going to be a little area for you to say, hey, I think they didn't really look into this. That's a spot for me to kind of dive into. And that's where you can make your contribution at.
Can I just say something? So William Shakespeare, right? He wrote plays a long time ago, sonnets a long time ago, hundreds of years ago. If we did a search right now in the global dissertations database that I mentioned earlier, we would get thousands of dissertations about Shakespeare's plays. People are still, right now as we speak, someone is working on a dissertation involving Shakespeare. So there's always nothing is completely covered. I mean, I think we would be hard pressed to think of a topic that was completely covered.
The last word's never been said, right?
Right.
Yeah.
There's still fertile ground there that you can grow something from. So yes, you might see things that that looks like they've covered my topic A to Z, but probably not. You might need to expand your thought. You might need to talk to your advisor and talk about maybe a slight shift or one thing to zero in on that they only glossed over, and that's going to be where you're really going to dig deep. But it's 2018. Thousands and thousands of dissertations and theses have been written, but there's still lots of room. There's still lots of room in topics.
Okay, I do have a question from the WebEx crew, and so this is a question more for Abby, and it's from a Norfolk State University student who wants to know if it's possible for NSU students to access the ODU database.
Okay, no, unfortunately, but I have to be very plain about that. So when libraries sign contracts with the database companies, they're very airtight legal contracts that we will only allow access to current ODU faculty, staff, and students. So once you become an alumna or alumnus and graduate, you no longer have access to the databases. People outside, so they would have to go through their own Norfolk State library system and see what resources they have available to them.
Okay,
Yep, you're welcome.
If there's no much question, I'd like to conclude by showing my appreciation to distinguished faculty, and thanks for the questions and being here today in a rainy day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It was great.